This advice is general and does not take into account your objectives, financial situations, or needs. You should consider whether the advice is suitable for you and your personal circumstances. Before you make any decision about whether to acquire a financial product, you should obtain and read the relevant product disclosure statement. Good morning, my name's Patrick Malcolm. I'm a senior partner at GFM Wealth Advisory. This morning I'm here with Stephen Arnold. Stephen is the Chief Investment Officer and founder of Aoris Investment Management. Thank you for joining us today, Stephen.
A pleasure, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming down from Sydney. For those that are in Melbourne, obviously you're listening a little bit later, but it's about -4 degrees this morning, so we've put on the good weather for you. Just to start with, Stephen, perhaps could you share your journey and what led you to establish the Aoris business?
Well, I've been investing since 1991 and investing internationally for more than 3 decades. And I always thought the best investment management businesses were independent businesses. So we founded Aoris in 2017. And by being independent, it allows us to control some key factors about the business that we think really matter to long-term client outcomes. And 4 of those are, 1, we are a single strategy business. We are and always will be a single strategy firm. We don't have a fund for every day of the week. We're here to do one thing and do it well. That's number 1. Number 2 is the quantum of money that managers are responsible for can impact performance. And so we've said that we are a FUM or asset limited business. Number 3, we are a deliberately transparent business. We like clients to see what they own. It allows us to talk about why we own them. When we make mistakes, we want to talk about it and explain to clients what we've learned. So transparency is foundational principle number 3. And number 4, we are a staff-owned and aligned business. The only international equities that our staff can own is the Aoris Fund. So by being independent, it has allowed us to make decisions about things we think really matter to client outcomes. And there's 4 key foundational principles for Aoris.
Thank you for setting the foundation with those, Stephen. So Aoris has a very distinctive investment philosophy. Could you perhaps reiterate those core principles that guide the investment decisions and what you believe sets Aoris apart from other managers that are in the market?
Patrick, at our heart, we see ourselves as business owners. We want to own businesses that become progressively more valuable over time. And as owners, we fully participate in the growth and value of those businesses. And we want businesses where the risk of a disappointing outcome is low. We also are very deliberately selective. We own a maximum of 15 stocks. In fact, today it's just 14. By being selective, it allows us to be very demanding on the attributes that we're looking for, the prices that we pay, and allows us to be very considered when we make portfolio changes in ways that wouldn't be possible if we owned many more stocks than we do. So we're business owners. We're looking for long-term compounding quality businesses at prices that make those businesses great investments, and we're deliberately very selective.
Now, in terms of the concept of quality, we come across this a lot when we look at the Aoris materials. So quality means lots of things to lots of different people. How does Aoris define quality, and what are your non-negotiables when it comes to considering investments as quality investments?
Well, you're absolutely right, Patrick. Quality is a loosely defined term, but it means it's really very much at the heart of our approach. So of the many attributes that we're looking for, number 1, we want businesses to grow. A company can't become more valuable over time if it doesn't grow and grow profitably. We want businesses that are leaders in their market. We want leadership positions where being the leader matters. Now, I'm not sure that being the largest car company in the world, the largest bank, the largest airline, or the largest steel company bestows great advantages on those leading companies. But there are industries where being the largest really matters. And that's what we're looking for. Now, from a position of leadership, we're looking for businesses that outgrow their peer group every year and where that leadership advantage, that muscle, gets stronger every year. We like companies in industries where the competitive structure is relatively stable. The market share doesn't move around easily, but we own the leading share gaining businesses. We want conservative management that's run with a conservative capital structure that provides a lot of robustness during difficult periods and also provides optionality so they can put their foot down and invest prudently when appropriate. And We also like businesses that have a lot of natural breadth and diversification. Now, if I think about it like a spectrum, at one end of the spectrum, you've got narrow businesses, what I call one-legged stools. You imagine a biotech tech business, something that does one thing in one place. That's an inherently fragile business. Quality for us includes breadth and diversification, companies that serve many customers across multiple end markets in multiple places, and we could talk about a few of them. Now, across those many attributes, we can be more or less demanding, and by being as selective as we are, it allows us to be deliberately very demanding on all of those attributes.
Understood. Now, I guess one of the outcomes from your process as well is to be a long-term investor. Can you maybe share an example of holding sort of long-term views around companies may have influenced an investment decision or your approach to a particular company when it comes to a long-term investment horizon?
Yeah, I think the last few months, we've been really well served by having a deliberately long-term mindset. And at the heart of that begins with recognizing that when you own a share, you own a share of a business, not a share of the economy, not a share of some political concept. You own a share of the business. And the value of that business is not a function of what it's going to earn in 2025. It's a function of its long-term earnings power. So keeping a sharp eye on that concept, recognizing that we own businesses and the long-term earnings power matters, not just the current earnings, has stood us in good stead through all the choppiness and distraction of this year. Now, when it comes to individual businesses, perhaps a good example is Microsoft, where there's been some press speculation the first few months of this year that they've been cancelling data center investments, deferring leases and so on, perhaps painting a picture that the long-term demand profile behind their cloud investments was not as strong as people had thought. And that adversely affected the share price for a period of time. But we kept our eye very much on the long-term horizon, very much keeping an eye on what we're hearing from a broad spectrum of companies and Microsoft's customers, as well as Microsoft themselves. We were confident that the long-term demand picture, their cloud investments, was very sound. We added to our position in Microsoft earlier in the year, and it's been well rewarded. When the company reported their March quarter results a few weeks ago, they did indeed paint a very strong picture of current demand and as well as all the pipeline of future demand that'll drive revenue growth for many years to come. So I think that's one of many good examples of us keeping a keen eye on the long term, not getting too distracted by the short term.
Beautiful segue into our next question, and I'm assuming you get sick of people like me asking this question, Stephen. There's been a lot written, said, and everything else about the Magnificent Seven, and I can only imagine you get many people asking you, why don't you own more of these stocks? I believe at the moment that of the Magnificent Seven, potentially the Magnificent Six now, but we'll leave that to the side, you only own Microsoft. So can you give us our views or give us your views of the Magnificent Seven in the context of the Aoris investment philosophy and why potentially some of those haven't or won't be included in your portfolio?
Well, it's a very topical question. And it starts with what are the many types of businesses, and we have a very large no-go zone as part of our selective approach. And this part of that no-go zone are businesses that I'd call at the sharp end of change. And within the Magnificent Seven, we have some exciting sounding businesses in fast-growing markets, but in new fast-growing markets, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's AI chips, or even weight loss drugs is another good example of fast-growing but fast-changing markets.
We can call them fads.
Well, it makes it very difficult to look forward with confidence that who will be the leader in this market 5 years from now? How large will that market be? How profitable will it be? What role will the government play in this market 5 years from now? Our preference is very much businesses that are in more established markets. The government plays as small a role as possible, like businesses more in control of their own destiny than is the case when it comes to electric vehicles or who NVIDIA can sell its chips to. Is China export controlled? So that's a lot of those other Magnificent Seven businesses fall into our no-go zone for reasons of government influence, for the fast-changing fluid characteristics of the competitive structure of those markets. And when it comes to Microsoft, it's different. Microsoft is a broad business It's a long-established business. It serves many, many different customers from many, many use cases in many parts of the world. It's a business that many parts of what they offer, there's free competition. You can get Google Docs instead of Microsoft Word. There's free operating systems. But people choose Microsoft and they choose to pay for it, which is a great attestation, if you like, of the value proposition that they offer when there's free alternatives that people don't choose. It's a business that's been a leader in their market for many, many years, whether it's office productivity tools, whether it's the software security tools. And that leadership position is strengthened through time. So you can look forward with a lot of confidence in the case of Microsoft. As well known as the business might be, we think it's an underappreciated business. It has, for us, much more favourable characteristics than is true of those other large technology businesses.
I've heard many people now describe as Microsoft resembling more like a utility stock than a technology stock, in the sense that there's all these people that need to use this stuff on a day-to-day basis and have no choice, like electricity, like gas, like water, or telecommunications.
I think there are some utility characteristics, but I'd say Microsoft is much more favourable to that. When we think about a utility, we might think it's established but no growth. What's one of the impressive things about Microsoft is across its broad spectrum of activities, how broad the growth has been, even in mature sounding applications like the Office tools, PowerPoint, Excel, Word and Windows. They've grown that part of their business at 10% per annum for a decade in mature sounding parts. The other characteristics we like about Microsoft is, as essential as it is for people like you and me in our businesses, Microsoft has been very reticent when it comes to price increases. Sometimes utilities, they know that you don't have choices and they're not hesitant in putting through big inflation-busting prices every year. We've really admired Microsoft by not squeezing customers in the way utilities often do, putting much more value in the hands of users and winning more users rather than getting existing users to pay more for the same thing.
Understood. So last question about the Magnificent Seven. Have you ever owned any of the Magnificent Seven outside Microsoft in the portfolio?
We haven't.
Do you believe that there could be a point in time in the future that you could own those stocks in the portfolio, or is it too hard to predict at this point in time in terms of their characteristics and quality and these sorts of things looking down the line?
Well, some of those businesses are evolving. In the case of, say, an Alphabet, I think their search business perhaps is facing more competition in the form of AI and ChatGPT tools than it did a few years ago. So that's one we'd probably step further away from. In the case of Amazon, their retail part of their business, you and I probably buy things every month on Amazon, that established part of their business has been only occasionally profitable for most of the last 20 years because they invest so much in adding value to their retail proposition, expanding into new countries. But in the last few years, it's become more consistently profitable. And so Amazon for us is a more interesting investment proposition today than it was a few years ago.
Interesting. Now we move from the Magnificent Seven to the S&P 493, which has a nice little ring to it. So obviously, if you're significantly underweight the Magnificent Seven, there's a significant overweight to stocks that are outside those seven. So can you talk to us around how you uncover opportunities in that space, particularly those companies maybe outside the top 100 companies in the world, and why they sort of proliferate the Aoris portfolio?
Well, I think it starts with having a very clear idea of the characteristics that we're looking for. Now, many of those are observable financial characteristics. We can use financial screens and database to shine the light on businesses that exhibit those characteristics. Profitability, growth, conservative balance sheets, and so on are measurable. And the other non-measurable ones, the things that we can ascertain from reading an annual report, we have a very clear idea of what we're looking for, the characteristics that jump off the page and make a business immediately interesting to us. Now, you may be interested to know that of our 14 businesses today, 5 of them are domiciled in the UK.
Wow.
And of our 14 businesses, 10 of them have a market capitalization of less than 100 billion US. So we're quite different from the broader equity market or the names people often read about. Perhaps if you can indulge me, we can bring one of those UK businesses to life. And it's a company called Compass Group. Now, Compass is the largest contract catering business in the world. They feed 15 million people every day through places of work, corporate cafeterias, hospitals, schools, universities, remote mining sites, defence facilities, and sporting stadiums. In fact, since we're in Melbourne today, Patrick,
Yes.
When people go to the MCG on the weekend, Compass Group runs the catering facilities at the MCG, as they do at the Melbourne Tennis Centre and as they do at the National Gallery.
Pretty sure the name comes up on my credit card statement when I'm at the MCG, Stephen, so it is ringing a bell.
There we go. And as they do at the National Gallery, Victoria. Now, if you add all of those types of facilities together globally, today, about 45% of them are self-operated. Hospitals that run their own cafeterias, universities that run their own cafeterias, corporate places of work that run their own cafeterias, and 55% is outsourced to groups like Compass Group. One of the things that makes this so interesting to us is with unemployment rates in Australia and many parts of the world at or around historic lows, and hospitality labour being very, very tight, many of these organisations are deciding that it's best to outsource. And so about 1% per year of this total market moves from being self-catered to outsourced. And there's huge advantages of being the largest. And Compass is by far the largest. In fact, there's no organisation that buys more food every day in America than Compass. So they can say to a prospective client, day one, we can reduce your food bill, what your employees will pay or what your visitors to a stadium will pay. We can reduce your food costs by 30%. And we can manage labour because that's our specialty. We can create more attractive menus, perhaps to your students on campus. And we can manage the vagaries of food inflation because that's what we do very, very well. So Compass is taking share every year in an attractive growing market. It's a deliberately very broad business across all sorts of different facilities. Google's their largest customer, but it's only 2% of Compass's revenue. And here's a fun fact. They keep their customers on average for 25 years. Extraordinary.
Wow.
So there's a business that we can look forward with a lot of confidence. It's a growing business. It's a profitable business. There's a huge outsourcing opportunity. There's huge advantages of being the largest, which they are. And it's a business where the vicissitudes, the ups and downs in the economy matter very little to their business, as does government policy, trades and geopolitics. And so Compass is one of those hidden gems, one of those 5 UK businesses that we own. We don't read about, but we may well be customers every time we go to the MCG.
Yeah, so obviously high levels of recurring revenue with growth as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The stock's been in the portfolio for a while?
It's been in the portfolio since inception, other than about a period of about a year where, as you can imagine, over COVID, it had a very adverse impact on the business for a period. But what we liked when we purchased the business for the portfolio in 2021 was how much Compass had improved their business. They'd taken deliberately self-help actions, particularly in Europe, where while the US was sort of the powerhouse, the engine for the group, Europe had been a bit of a laggard. And they said, we can make this business better by investing and strengthening it, which they did. And the second post-COVID characteristic was a lot of organisations that had been reticent to outsource, particularly in Europe, decided that, look, labour is really scarce. A lot of people are retiring early. Now let's rethink whether we want to be a self-operator. So the trend towards outsourcing has accelerated post-COVID, and Compass has made the European business, about a third of revenue, a much better business than it was pre-COVID.
Interesting. Now, probably your second most disliked question, Stephen, is around the macroeconomic environment. So I'm not going to ask you a question about the macroeconomic environment. I'm going to make the comment that Aoris are stock pickers and you guys really ultimately try to ignore the noise that goes on in a macroeconomic sense. So I'm going to ask you, why do you think ignoring the macroeconomic environment is a good way of investing when it comes to stock picking?
Well, Patrick, I think this is where the media really do us a great disservice, because every time we're reading about the financial press, the media is telling us that whatever happened in the share market today was a function of what CPI came out, what unemployment figures came out, and they ingrain a mindset.
Or a tweet, Stephen?
Big one?
Or a tweet?
Or a tweet, that's right. Well, whatever's coming out of the White House. So we're conditioned to think the economy matters far more than it really does, particularly to the long-term prospects for share markets and particularly individual business performance. So it does take discipline and effort to screen that out, recognise that it doesn't matter as much as the papers are telling us that it does. Now, for our stock selection, we deliberately own businesses where the economy matters as little as possible, Compass Group being a good example. And one of the challenges of businesses that have big earning cycles, imagine a home building company, a cement company, maybe a home improvement retailer. It's always hard as investors to know what's normal. Are we coming off a super post-COVID period in home improvement retailing?
Is it the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end?
That's right. So it's hard to make good investment decisions. And the other challenge for very cyclical businesses is management can be tempted to hit the brakes too hard in the inevitable sort of post-boom periods when those businesses slow down or go into reverse. They can hit the brakes, take cost actions that can be damaging to the long-term prospects of the business. And being human, they can overreact. So we really like businesses like Compass being a good example, or Microsoft, where the ups and downs of the economy matter as little as possible. It helps management make good long-term decisions, and it helps us as investors better calibrate what's normal, because that's how we think about the value of the business.
Now, what I will ask is, in the global economic landscape at the moment, what do you see as being the challenges and opportunities in terms of investing at the moment? And to what extent are those factors influencing your investment decisions, or are they not influencing your investment decisions at all?
I think one of the challenges for investors is just how much noise there is.
Yep.
It takes great discipline to screen that out, but we're getting inundated with a lot of seeming change, a lot of noise that makes the environment seem to be very volatile, very different, hostile perhaps. And so that's challenge number one as investors, recognizing what doesn't matter. It's also a challenge for businesses because the rules of the game for many businesses seem to be fluid. If I'm importing from China, are the tariffs 145% or 30%? That's another challenge. But for within that, there's huge opportunities. For businesses, the sort of businesses that we like to own, that provide an efficiency solution to their clients, like a Compass or a Microsoft, businesses that helps their customers be more compliant, help them outsource labour, help them to improve their productivity. In today's environment with labour shortages, increasing cost of living, increasing cost of doing businesses, volatile, changing rules of the game, if you're a solutions provider, an essential value add to your customers, I think the opportunities are great. And so for that reason, we're very constructive on those very select, high-quality, productivity-enabling businesses.
Yep. So ignoring the noise, does that make it harder when you're picking stocks, or does it make it easier when you're picking stocks because you're ignoring the noise, or is ignoring the noise the hard part?
I think being human, it is. We're all intellectually curious people within the business. We want to understand the world, but we almost have to physically take that hat off and recognise as an investor, the sort of investor we want to be in, the sort of businesses that we want in the Aoris portfolio to sift out the signal from the noise, if you like, deliberately screen out those externalities. And we like businesses that recognise that as well, that for a Compass that part of their job is helping businesses manage labour, manage volatile food inflation. And if they do that really well, they'll win more business, they'll win more individual consumers within their businesses like a Google, and they'll be able to continue to take share in an environment that presents certain challenges. So it does take discipline, but within that we see great opportunities.
Final question around, non-investment side of things, economy related, geopolitics and investment decisions. Do you need to factor in these global uncertainties when assessing investments at the moment? Or again, is it we just assess each stock on its merits?
I think from a high level, it's good to recognise that what we've got used to over the last 10 to 20 years, increasingly fluid global trade arrangements. It's been beneficial perhaps to global growth, productivity, employment, earnings growth. May not be the environment that we're living in for a good period of time. That's number one. Number two, governments are being more interventionist,
Yep.
and particularly in the US, getting involved in industries in a way that we haven't been used to.
Yep.
Number two, and number three, to reiterate for us, owning businesses where the externalities matter as little as possible, where policy matters as little as possible. To keep asking ourselves, is something mattering for this business in a way that we hadn't anticipated? Are there opportunities being presented for businesses that can carve out revenue and productivity solutions within an ever-changing environment? So very much recognising that the rearview mirror may not be as instructive to what's coming ahead.
Yep.
Not take things for granted, and be the businesses with conservative capital structures are even more valuable, with the ability to take on debt, invest opportunistically in an environment that will present opportunities to make intelligent acquisitions as valuable. A management with conservative mindset that run their businesses without taking huge leaps and huge risks, and for us to be very selective, coming back to owning just 14, 15 businesses.
Yep. You're very hard markers. There's thousands and thousands of stocks in the world, Stephen, and you guys can own 15, but you only own 14. I pity the 15th stock that is missing from the portfolio or has just been removed from the portfolio. I'm fascinated to understand portfolio construction and position sizing in such a concentrated portfolio. Can you talk us through that process?
Well, you're right, Patrick. We have a maximum of 15 stocks, and today it's 14. We expect to own our businesses on average for 4 years to make about 4 changes per year. We have a maximum position weight of 10%. That's as large as it can get. At the lower end tends to be about 4, so that we can relatively evenly balance the portfolio capital across our 14 or 15 businesses. Now, when it comes to portfolio construction and risk, we really value businesses that have that internal diversification. Compass, again, being a good example, or Microsoft, or Visa or Accenture, that serve lots of different customers in lots of different end markets. We don't want 14 or 15 narrow one-legged stool businesses. Yep. We want 15, 14 broad businesses. I should mention, where businesses do similar things, we won't own 2 of them. Yep. We like relatively independent businesses. We own Visa in the portfolio. We wouldn't own MasterCard as well because of their similar characteristics.
Yep. And I guess the question would be, there's this sort of understanding that diversification is good and owning more is better. Why do you think a 15-stock portfolio is better than a 60-stock portfolio in terms of investment outcomes over the long term?
Well, I think it's just having for us a keen sense of what works for us, yep. Recognising other people can do things differently and do it well.
Yep.
For us, being very selective, owning a maximum 15 businesses. But diversification does matter. For yep. us, it's diversification within the business, yep. rather than owning lots and lots and lots of businesses to get that diversification.
And I guess we sort of spoke through the risk management piece in terms of position sizing and these sorts of things. The catalyst to either remove a stock from the portfolio or add that 15th stock to the portfolio, Stephen, what's the process with that?
Well, yeah, Patrick, that's a really interesting question because we think very hard about the risk of what we call fade. If we think about the 100, perhaps imagine 50 great exceptional businesses 15 years ago, probably a lot less than half of them are as great today as they were 15 years ago. There's a tendency for great businesses to become less great over time. Yep. So for us, we have a keen eye on the early warning signs of great businesses becoming less great. Now, that may happen through the external environment. Maybe their markets mature, competition heats up. But more often than not, it's self-inflicted. It's management becoming complacent, arrogant, distracted, in a hurry, making big acquisitions to grow their business faster than they can do it organically. So we have a very keen eye when it comes to risk management. But are we seeing the early warning signs of management behaviour that speaks to those fade risks? And that will often inform a decision to exit a business. Now, it might be price. We love the business. We just don't love the price anymore.
Yep.
That can be reason to exit a position, number one. Or it's something's changed, or we're seeing the early warning signs of degradation.
That must be really hard because I can only imagine that with such a concentrated portfolio, you have a real affinity. I won't use the term love, but a real warmth for the stocks that you own in the portfolio. How hard is it not to sort of get confirmation bias and fall in love with something and just perhaps be ignorant of new risks as they emerge?
Well, it can be really hard. And perhaps to give you an example, we'd owned Nike in the portfolio for a good few years. It was a successful investment for us. But during the COVID period and the post-COVID period, we began to see some of these early warning signs of management making decisions that were detrimental to the business. So we sold that stock about 3 years ago, but in hindsight, we should have sold it a bit earlier than we did. Now, some of those management actions were to take their product away from retailers that had traditionally had lots of Nike product in there, because Nike wanted consumers to go to Nike stores and go to the Nike website. But I think the company underestimated that sometimes people like choice. They like to go to a store when they can try on a few things, have advice from someone in the store that's not a Nike employee. And by taking product away, they opened the door to competition. And now those retailers have other product. But during the COVID period, as everyone was sort of going to the gym, going running, the Nike business was booming. And that created a really favourable picture of what the business was going, how it was performing. But within that, there were decisions the company was making that were long-term detrimental. So we grappled with that for a while, made a decision to exit the business 3 years ago. But those are the early warning signs that we want to be attuned to. Even if the results themselves are favourable, we're looking for is management making decisions, pricing decisions perhaps, how they treat their supply chain, how they treat their customers that may be harmful to the long-term prospects of the business.
Could Nike be a quality business again, Stephen?
Well, I think the business, important things have changed. Competition's become stronger, partly because of Nike's own actions. So I think we have to see the business become much healthier than it is today for a long period of time before we'd reconsider it from the portfolio. In the meantime, we're happy to watch from the sidelines.
Understood. An acronym we're all familiar with, ESG, environmental, social and governance. And these have become increasingly important for investors, probably over the medium to long term. It has been around for a while now. Could you outline the Aoris approach to ESG and how you factor ESG into your investment decisions, research process, these sorts of things?
Yeah, we take a deliberately wide lens on those things, Patrick. Its values, its behaviour, and they influence the growth prospects for business over the long term and also the risks to the business over the long term. And within that is not just carbon emissions, it's how a business treats its customers, how a business treats its employees, how it treats the rules that it has to comply with, the governance part, the board, the compliance standards, how they respond to adverse events, and also how it treats the resources. So some of those things are measurable, carbon emissions, water consumption perhaps, but some of them are less measurable, and we have to make a judgment on, do we feel good about how they're treating the rules? Are they skirting the boundaries? Are they operating well within, are they respecting the rules and operating well within the boundary lines? Are they strong-arming their customers into paying more? That's a behaviour we don't feel great about. Do they pay their employees as little as possible, or are they more generous than that? So we take a wide lens. It's in some parts a judgment, a subjective judgment on behaviour, and other parts are very measurable, and we pay a lot of attention to that.
So this is a tough question. Is there sort of a materiality that you apply with ESG, and are there specific factors that you look for, or is it very company dependent based on the industry or sector that they're in?
I think it's pretty company dependent. So in the case of Microsoft, the data centers that they run consume a lot of energy, consume a lot of water, and those are measurable. And we like that Microsoft discloses them. In fact, they have very, very comprehensive disclosure across all sorts of metrics. So that's one behaviour that we like, is a company choosing to measure and report on what is in fact measurable. Now, some companies don't do that. And so the fact that they measure it tells us that it's important to them. They're thinking about it and allows us to measure and evaluate their progress. Is a direction of travel favourable? Are they consuming less water? Are they consuming less energy? Or is it going in the other direction? There are some businesses, perhaps a distribution business, where what matters more is the workplace accidents. They drive a lot of trucks around, and that might be the most important measure as far as employee safety for that business, and we can measure it. Is the company taking actions to improve their worker safety? For other businesses, it will be perhaps carbon emissions is really very much the most important thing. And what are they doing as far as alternative energy? For some businesses, they can take advantage of their size and influence to influence their suppliers. So L'Oreal has very exacting standards for their own business, but they also amplify their impact by telling their suppliers, look, here's the standards that you have to comply with in order to do business with L'Oreal. And that massively amplifies L'Oreal's sort of good behaviour and good standards by influencing the whole ecosystem of businesses that supply into L'Oreal.
Understood. Another question around company visits and how you go about this with your team. I can only imagine you get out there and pound the pavement a bit. So can you maybe talk us through how the Aoris team approaches visiting these companies and kicking the tyres, so to speak?
Yeah, we do that. We evaluate. Twice a year we go in pairs to the US. In fact, I'll be there in a week and a half with a colleague, and twice a year we go to the UK and Europe. Now, what we don't do is go to a big conference and sit in an auditorium and hear speaker after speaker. We go out to where those companies are based. So I'll be going to New York, Boston, Cleveland, Ohio, and Chicago. And by going to where companies are based, I think it gives you real insights. It's a bit like the difference between you can meet a friend for lunch at a restaurant or sometimes when you go to their house or they come to your house. There's insights into what matters to that person. Do they have pictures of their kids on the wall, or is it their golf trophies? They're all.
What if it's both?
If it's both, then they're a high achieving, family oriented person. And they tick all the boxes.
Thank you, Stephen.
It sounds like you, Patrick.
I do have golf trophies and photos of my children in my office, so yes.
we love that. And so it can illuminate values. It can give you clues. We own a business in the portfolio called Amphenol. We visited that company in the back streets of Connecticut many times. It's a very nondescript head office because the energy, the centre of gravity of that business is out in the field. In the head office, it's the size of a small house. They employ a dozen or so people. It probably hasn't had a coat of paint since you and I were born.
Yeah, okay.
But within there, they have photos of their senior management over many, many years. I think there's real pride in the corporate legacy, the history, the people, as well as being nondescript. There's pride that comes through. In Cleveland, Ohio, you might say, well, why would I go to Cleveland? We own America's largest paint company called Sherwin-Williams that's based in Cleveland. We'll be spending half a day with senior management, including a tour of a factory and a shop. And I'm sure that exercise will give us face-to-face time with people that we wouldn't otherwise interact with, including people behind the counter in the store, allowing us to ask them, well, what matters to the people that you serve every day? And give us the visual display of what does the store look like. And it'll also allow us direct interaction with the CFO and CEO, which we really value, and tells us that they value us as shareholders. So there's a real investment in time for us to get to Cleveland, but we think it'll be a really rewarding one.
Now, just rewinding a little bit to Amphenol, can you tell us what Amphenol does?
Amphenol supplies connectors and sensors into all manner of devices where there's electricity. It would include our phones that we all have, our laptops, our cars. There's plenty of electricity and hence connectors and sensors in cars, computer data centers. The aircraft I flew on this morning has got lots of them as well. And Amphenol, going back to our preference for businesses that are broad and diversified, serves all of those industries. And within that, there are some that are growing particularly fast right now, computer data centers being one of them.
Absolutely,
it accounts for about a third of Amphenol's revenue today. And in the last 12 months, it's more than doubled in revenue. In fact, in the March quarter, it grew 134%. So in a growing market, Amphenol is winning way more than its fair share by being a really valued supplier of critical components that oftentimes have to work in high pressure, high temperature, hostile environments for electronic components that has made them a share gainer fast-growing market. But it's not the only market and management, and we really value the breadth of the business across, as I said, a whole raft of end markets. As with all the cars that we drive, it may not be that the car market in aggregate isn't growing a lot in units, but the electrical component is, and it's a good growth market for Amphenol.
Understood. And I don't know you don't get bogged down in terms of thinking about stocks in terms of sectors. Is that a technology stock?
Well, it very much is a supply of technology, but not the exciting technology that we think about, but a raw material or a critical component supplier. But it's been around for a long, long time. It's not a newly created technology business. It's an established one. There's leadership position in most of these markets. And as I said, these are components that are far from generic. They're very, very specific. And Amphenol's position as a critical supplier of very differentiated components rewards them with very high profit margins.
Sounds like it should have a much flashier head office, Stephen, but that's okay. Closing questions. Areas of the market and specific trends that are interesting to you at the moment for the portfolio?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, of our 14 businesses today, 13 of them are suppliers of essential products and solutions to other businesses. L'Oreal being the only supplier to consumers. So we feel very optimistic that in a changing, challenging environment, if you're a solutions provider, an efficiency proposition, a productivity supplier to your customers, it's a good place to be. If you're a leading business, and you've probably been able to manage difficult environments better than your peers, such that if 2025 or 2026 turns out to be tougher years than we expect, we own the leading businesses that can gain share and win more business in environments that are more challenging to their competitors. So we recognise the challenges of the environment, but feel constructive about the businesses that we own today.
And maybe, sorry to end on a negative, but last question, are there any specific challenges that you're sort of doing the work on with regards to individual stocks within the portfolios at the moment, whether that's on valuation grounds or the things that we spoke about before in terms of changes in management views or those sorts of things, Stephen?
Well, we're recognising the cost of doing business, whether it's labour costs or components in the form of tariffs, is a challenge for many businesses. So we've got a keen eye on not just how much those costs are impacting the business, but how they're responding to it. That's key number one. As share prices have done well recently, we keep a keen eye on valuation as well, and we'll periodically make changes to the portfolio such that the portfolio still represents great value. And lastly, we've got a very active bench, a two-tier, what we call our A list and our B list, and we keep a keen eye on refreshing them so they represent the best candidates for the portfolio. And as prices move around, are there opportunities outside the portfolio that are better than what's in the portfolio? And we make gradual periodic changes. We expect 3 or 4 changes per year. And that allows us to maintain very high standards as well as attractive valuation.
Extremely high standards, 14 stocks, goodness. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.